What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me from Indiana, Chris Fedor, after the Cavs' latest loss, 114-112. But we know that this game meant almost nothing to the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially when it came to standings. Chris, when it comes to this game and how the Cavs were able to manage injuries with Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and Max Strus all out tonight, what did you get to see, and what was the biggest takeaway for you when it comes to what this bench unit was able to prove against an almost fully healthy Indiana Pacers team that was without Ben Shepherd, and that's the biggest loss that they had tonight?
I think the two things that stand out to me, Ethan, I'm always looking at the big picture, very similar to Kenny Atkinson. And if seeding holds, if the standings are what they are, the Cavs and the Pacers could match up in the second round. And we totally understand that regular season is not predictive of postseason, and matchups could be different, and lineups could be different, and intensity and focus and attention to detail and scheme and all that kind of stuff could be different. But the personnel is the same, right? For the most part. Like you said, the only one missing for Indiana was Ben Shepherd. The only rotation player who didn't play tonight for them was Ben Shepherd. So the two things that stood out to me were DeAndre Hunter in a small ball 5 lineup, and then Ty Jerome. And the reason why I say that is because, Kenny Atkinson purposely said that he put the ball in the hands of Ty Jerome repeatedly because he wanted to see how he could operate the offense against Andrew Nembhard. Andrew Nembhard is a pesky defender. Andrew Nembhard is somebody who kind of made his name in the playoffs last year during their playoff run, doing it at both ends of the floor, but known as that stifling perimeter defender who hounds guys 94 feet. And then his backup is TJ McConnell, who is a pesky defender, who is somebody who gets under the skin of the opponent. So seeing Ty Jerome, despite what should be limitations that he has, seeing him, function the way that he did, and basically shred Indiana's defense where they had no answers for him, I thought that was meaningful. And, one game does not tell Kenny Atkinson everything, and one game doesn't decide whether a guy's going to play in a playoff series or not. But you learn things about what Ty can do, what he can't do, and how he matches up against a specific group of personnel. And, to see Ty basically shred Indiana's defense, Kenny Atkinson came out point blank and said, he's going to be a big playoff contributor, and tonight solidified that for us. And then the other thing is DeAndre Hunter, because rebounding has not been something that he's been very good at since coming over from Atlanta. It's not something that he was very good at in Atlanta. So I think there are legitimate questions within the organization about, okay, like how much can we play DeAndre at the 4? How much can we play him as a small ball 5 if we want to go that direction? Whatever the situation may call for, there could be opportunities throughout the course of a playoff run where we want to play with a smaller lineup, where we think it's beneficial for us to play with a no big lineup, whatever reason that may be. So to see him have 11 rebounds, the second most in any game in his career in the regular season, to see him be a plus 18, to see him be able to battle with Miles Turner, Jarris Walker, Obi Toppin, that was meaningful from the Cavs' perspective. And the other thing is, who knows what situations are going to arise where Darius or Donovan are off the floor in foul trouble, or Darius and Donovan just don't have it going offensively because there's so much attention of the defense focused on them. Like, what's the other avenue for the Cavs offensively? And Kenny Atkinson said after the game that he purposely put the ball in the hands of DeAndre and made him such a focal point of the offense because he wanted to see, like, how much of that can he handle. So I think the end result of this game was certainly inconsequential, and you could say didn't have any meaning. But there were things that Kenny did. Everything he does has a purpose to it. Everything That's just how he operates. And there were things that he did throughout the course of this game that, in his own mind, was thinking forward to a potential second round matchup against Indiana. And when you had DeAndre play the way that he did and Ty play the way that he did, those individual things were meaningful from a data collection standpoint.
And I think that's a great point, Chris, because we talk a lot about the end of season awards and how Ty Jerome is not eligible for most improved player, but he's also in a bout with his own teammate, his best friend, DeAndre Hunter, for sixth man of the year. And something that I noticed, and I think that was pretty apparent, was anytime that Ty Jerome was off the floor, the Cavs looked very off balance. They looked out of sorts, right? And it looked like it was much more difficult for them to create offense, not only without Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, obviously, but also having Craig Porter Jr., a ball handler, a distributor, and someone that can get to his own shot. It looked like they were falling off of something that they had created with Ty Jerome on the floor. And we understand him to be such a huge portion of the offense, but not to mention that he had 24 points, 9 of 16 from the field, 4 of 6 from deep. But he also had 6 assists. So when he was on the floor, he was not only finding his shot and creating for himself, but he was also creating for others. And many of those times it was creating for DeAndre, who had 23 points, 9 of 19 from the field, 3 of 7 from deep. And as you mentioned, those 11 crucial rebounds. And also to end the game, even though Kenny Atkinson was not on the bench, and we're going to get to that in a second, with Johnny Bryant as the fill-in head coach after Kenny Atkinson received his first ejection of the entire season. The Cavs went with a lineup that saw neither Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, Ty Jerome, or DeAndre Hunter, and still put up a fight. One that's a testament to the players that were not on the floor, and it shows you where the Cavs' head is at and how the pecking order is set up for the playoffs, because guys that were on the floor, even though they're not two-way guys, are more than likely going to see less minutes in the playoffs than the guys that were on the bench resting. What did you think about that situation? And I'm going to let you get into the Kenny Atkinson ejection fighting for Tristan Thompson in that situation a little bit too.
I mean, Craig Porter Jr. has a very difficult role, and Ty Jerome was talking about this. So it's so hard to sit here and be overcritical of a guy who just has been at the end of the bench for a majority of the season, and he hasn't been used much in the NBA. But I think it heightens the importance of Ty Jerome. And obviously he was dealing with a little bit of a knee issue. It doesn't seem to be a problem. It doesn't seem to be hindering him. And I think that's great news for the Cavs, because they cannot play Craig Porter Jr. in the playoffs. They just can't. He's not ready for that. You mentioned the struggles that the Cavs had in terms of organization on the offensive end, in terms of just functioning well enough on the offensive end of the floor. For the first 10 minutes without Ty Jerome, and it came in 2 separate stints, the Cavs scored 4 total baskets. 4. And one of them was basically an uncontested dunk where Indiana had no clue what was going on, probably stunned that Tristan Thompson went throwback dunk on him. So it wasn't the same rhythmic offense. There wasn't the same flow to it. And there's not going to be. There's a drastic drop-off between Ty Jerome and Craig Porter Jr. There's a huge talent gap between those two guys. There's a huge experience gap between those two guys. So if something happens with Darius, Donovan, if they're struggling, if they're in foul trouble, Ty's going to have to be the one that anchors that group. He's going to have to be the one that stabilizes everything. And you just felt his abs every time he was off the floor. You felt that. And that's how it's been throughout the course of this season. When Ty has gotten out there, he has made an impact. You feel his energy. You feel the stability that he brings. You feel like the confidence that the Cavs get from playing alongside somebody like Ty, and the confidence that he plays with. And a source told me after the game that it's probably going to be the last time that Ty plays in the regular season. He's probably going to take off the final 2 games. Going to spend some time at home tomorrow in the New York area. And then fan appreciation night, the plan is to hold him off again. So he got he got the opportunity to get back in rhythm after the knee issue. He got an opportunity to kind of test his knee, see what he could do, what he couldn't do, what his body would allow, the kinds of movements that he needed to work through, shaking off any kind of rust. He was able to do that. Now it's about the playoffs, and he's really, really excited about it. Obviously, he has reasons to be, because the level of basketball that he is playing at um, is something that he has never showed before, not at a consistent level in the NBA. So if this was the final game for him in the regular season, like, what an impression to make on voters that have a difficult call when it comes to sixth man of the year. But he showed why he's been such an asset to the Cavs. If he needs to come off the bench and be the guy that organizes and stabilizes everything for that group, he'll do it. If he has to step into a starting role and play more minutes and get a significant opportunity, he's able to do that too. He's able to thrive in either one of them. He's able to be effective in either one of them. And I think part of the definition of sixth man of the year is, if you're given a bigger opportunity, can you step up when something happens to one of your starters? Can you step forward and take on that bigger role and still thrive? And Ty was able to do that. And I think he has made a strong case for sixth man of the year throughout the course of this season. And I think tonight just kind of encapsulated that and what his value is to this basketball team. If anybody had any doubts about his value to this basketball team, just look at how they played with and without him. And it's been like that all season long. It's not just a Craig Porter Jr. thing. It's not just a tonight thing. So I thought Ty was great in so many different areas. And it's no offense to Craig, because I understand it's a very, very difficult role. But to me, tonight just really heightened the importance of Ty, especially when you get into the playoffs.
Again, not to poo poo on Craig Porter Jr., right? Even though he was put into a tough role, he still had to man an offense that had no shooters. Can we be truthful about that? At the end of the fourth quarter, there were no shooters on the floor when Johnny Bryant put out a lineup that had Javonte Green, Craig Porter
Yeah.
Jr., Tristan Thompson, Jalen Tyson, and Isaac Okoro. Like, there was nobody for him to look to get the ball to and create offense and be like, okay, I can just get off the ball. I feel like Craig was pressing a little bit because he was put in that situation. And he still ended up having the third most points scored in the contest for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He finished with 16 points, 7 of 17 from the field. And obviously, I think there's a lot of room to grow for him. And it's only his second year in the NBA, and he's still trying to figure things out. But I think he still handled it with a calm and chill demeanor that has allowed him to do that in those situations. And it proves that he's ready to be an NBA player. He's good enough to be a backup point guard in this league. And I think a lot of different people around the league were thinking that if he was on a different team, his situation could be vastly different.
I think it's important to point out that that was the plan going into the game. Obviously the Cavs clinched the other night, and that allowed them to operate the way that they did with resting 4 of their 5 starters. But it also meant, maintenance for the guys that they think are going to be important for them in the playoffs. And coming into the night, I was told that Ty Jerome was probably going to be kept right around 25-ish, and they kept him right around 25-ish. So they didn't play him at all in the fourth quarter. Because the outcome, the result of the game, just didn't matter to the Cavs. They weren't chasing the number 1 overall seed. They have basically conceded that, even though they had a mathematical possibility still coming into tonight's game against Indy of catching Oklahoma City. They conceded that already. Now, they thought they could still win with the guys that they played with. That tells you about their culture. It tells you about the trust that Kenny Atkinson has in the team. He's been talking all season long about 15 deep, 18 deep, and he backed that up by believing in the guys that he believed in coming into tonight with what he was planning to do for the fourth quarter. It was going to be the stay ready guys. They were going to finish the game. That was always going to be the plan. So, they weren't going to finish with DeAndre. They wanted to keep him right around 30-ish. They weren't going to finish with Ty. They wanted to keep him right around 25. They weren't going to finish with Sam Merrill. They wanted to keep him right around 25. They weren't going to finish with Dean Wade. They wanted to keep him right around 25 to 30. They wanted to give an opportunity to some of the stay ready guys, and that was the plan going into tonight. So it wasn't just a situation where Johnny Bryant took over for Kenny Atkinson and didn't have a full handle on what to do with the lineup. That was always going to be the plan in the fourth quarter, and there's probably going to be stuff like that happens Friday against New York, and then Sunday in the finale against Indy, depending on who actually plays in those games.
Yeah, and I didn't expect those guys, even though they're rotation guys and starters tonight, to finish the game. But Chris, I was a little bit surprised that the two-way guys didn't get some run tonight, if that was the case. Sure, you want to still keep Isaac Okoro fresh because you don't know if you're going to need to use him in any specific role. Sure, you might want to see more from Javonte Green, a little bit of Jalen Tyson. But I was surprised that they didn't give Amani Bates, Luke Travers, Naquan Tomlin any minutes at all to end the game. That was probably the most eye-catching thing for me outside of the Ty Jerome minutes where he wasn't on the floor and what the Cavs looked like. But with Tristan Thompson going to the cup strong and all these things, I feel like we have to touch on the most pivotal moment of tonight, which was Kenny Atkinson getting tossed for the first time and getting double teed up, defending a player that has rarely played this year, but we know he cherishes being on the bench, being right next to him in most occasions, and helping him connect not only the coaches, but also the players and all these things. So what did you make of Kenny Atkinson getting tossed, being very vocal about his thoughts on Tristan Thompson's no call when he drove to the basket, and what it says about how he has continuously embodied what he's talked about and how he loves, respects, and is going to fight for every single player on this roster?
I think it just comes down to what all of the players have said about Kenny from the very beginning, and they've continued to say it about him because of the evidence that has piled up throughout the course of this year. He's a player's coach. He's going to have their back. He's going to fight for them. I don't think this group needed any other reason to buy into Kenny Atkinson or believe in Kenny Atkinson. But when you sit there and you say that it's a 15-man team or an 18-man team, and then you go to bat for guy number 14 on the roster, 13, 14, I don't want to slight him in any sort of way, but, it's true. At this stage of his career, 14 years in, his best basketball behind him, for Kenny to go to bat for him like he was Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, it just backs up all of the things that Kenny has said about this team. And I thought it was a meaningful moment, especially with the playoffs right around the corner, to set a tone with officials and say, hey, we're not going to stand for this stuff. I'm going to defend my guys. There was clearly a foul on the play. You missed it. No, we're not going to allow that. And I don't know what got into Kenny, but before he got to the other foul line, he was doggedly pursuing the referee as if it was TJ McConnell picking up Craig Porter Jr. 94 feet away from the basket. He was not going to let that go. And players came over and they tried to calm down Kenny. And Johnny Bryant did the thing where he always does, where he tried to calm down Kenny, but it just wasn't going to happen tonight. He was not going to relent. He got the first technical and he kept going. He got the second technical and he kept going. And he got further and further onto the court and closer to the foul line of the Indiana Pacers because he had a message to send. And it goes back full circle. There was a theme Thursday night of, even though the final score didn't matter, even though the outcome didn't matter, it was a meaningful game. Kenny believed that. So you try telling him that game number 79 didn't have any meaning whatsoever, or game number 80. didn't have any meaning whatsoever. Like, this is a guy who is learning things about his team. This is a guy who is setting a tone. This is a guy who is setting an example. This is a guy who is doing things that resonate with the guys in that locker room, no matter time and score, no matter time of year.
And I do want to just go through the Eastern Conference and what happened in tonight really quickly, looking around the league. With the Knicks losing to the Pistons, they lead over the number 4 Pacers, trimmed to just one game. The Pacers beating the Cavaliers. As I mentioned, they clinched the top 4 seed and pull within one game of number 3 Knicks. The Milwaukee Bucks defeated the New Orleans Pelicans, maintaining 2-game lead over the number 6 Detroit Pistons. The Pistons beat the Knicks, remaining 2 games behind the number 5 seeded Bucks, and the Hawks defeated the Knicks, pulling 1 game ahead of the number 9 seeded Bulls. So right now, it's looking a little bit crazy with how the bottom of the Eastern Conference is going to finish out. But if everything were to happen today, the potential is for the Cavs to either face whoever wins the game between the Chicago Bulls and the Miami Heat, the 9 and the 10 seed, and then whoever loses the game between the Orlando Magic and Atlanta Hawks, those 2 teams will face off, and then the winner of that game will play the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round as the 8th seed. Chris, with all these options out of the play-in tournament, to me, it's the Atlanta Hawks that is the best team, the best matchup for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round. What are your thoughts?
Well, I just think the Cavs have reached a different kind of level, Ethan, where it's going to take a lot to challenge them in a 7-game series. And not every team is capable of it. I also don't know that there's a specific weakness or a specific flaw with the Cavs that is exploitable for the other team. And what I mean by that is, 2 years ago, you knew that the Knicks were a horrible matchup for the Cavs for a variety of reasons. But stylistically, it was just not a favorable matchup. You knew last year, even in the first round, even though that there was a talent disparity, you knew that there were things that the Orlando Magic could do against the Cavs that were going to be bothersome because of their strength, because of their physicality, because of their depth, because of their, size and length. Jonathan Isaac is 6'10" with long arms, and Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Mo Wagner. So you just knew that the kind of style, and they were grimy and defensive minded. Even though they had deficiencies, you just knew the kind of style that Orlando played, that they were going to bother the Cavs. Not necessarily that they were going to win the series, but they were going to bother them at points. They were going to test them. They were going to, beat them up physically. And that's exactly what happened. So if we look at this Cavs group, and it's a different one, it's a different team with different players, with more mature players, with more evolved players. I don't know. I don't know the kind of style that I look at the Cavs and say they would have a hard time handling that. I don't think it matters if it's Atlanta. I don't think it matters if it's Chicago. I don't think it matters if it's Miami, because those teams aren't on the Cavs level. The Cavs are so much better than all of those teams, and I don't think there's a thing that they do specifically that would bother the Cavs in that kind of way. Now, Orlando becomes a different kind of conversation because they're going to bully, right? They're going to be physical. They're going to play defense. So that style could take something out of the Cavs physically. But again, I don't know that there's a team that really stands out to me as all that problematic until the Cavs get to the second round. And I think Indiana could be a problem for them. Not that I think Indiana will beat them 4 times in 7 tries. I do not. I would not pick the Pacers in that series. But they're mature. They're experienced. They went to the conference finals last year. Tyrese Halliburton knows how to handle the playoff environment in a way that Darius Garland doesn't. And the other thing is, I think Pascal Siakam is the kind of guy that could punish the Cavs switches. Like you sit there and you say, well, they've got Evan Mobley, they've got Jared Allen, and that allows them to have multiple defenders that they can put on Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin. Like, yes, that's correct. But the Cavs are a very switch heavy defense, and they believe in that strongly. And if they have Siakam setting the screen for Tyrese Halliburton over and over and over again, and it forces a switch with Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell, yeah, I think that's a matchup that Indiana can certainly exploit. I think that's, a pathway for them to get consistent quality offense. On top of that, Rick Carlisle, to me, is a top 5 coach in the NBA. They have enough length, size, and athleticism to hang with the Cavs on the perimeter and kind of chase them all around the court and maybe disrupt some of their free-flowing offense. And like I said, Tyrese Halliburton is a playoff guy. Like, he has shown it on the playoff stage. And with him running that offense, they can shoot threes, they can score in bunches. That's a prerequisite to dealing with the Cavs. Like, I don't think there's a specific thing that bothers the Cavs, but if there's a team that can score with them, if there's a team that can shoot with them, like, that's where it starts. You better be able to shoot. You better be able to score if you're going to hang with the Cavs. And Indiana certainly can. It's one of the best offenses in the NBA. And Tyrese Halliburton is the conductor of that. And he is a really, really good player, 2-time All-Star. I think he's in the MVP conversation this year, given the impact that he has had from start to finish, given the value that he brings on a possession-to-possession basis. And it doesn't mean that the Cavs don't have other areas that they can attack on Indiana and areas that they can exploit when it comes to the Pacers. And it doesn't mean that the Pacers don't have questions, especially on the defensive end of the floor. But that's the only team besides Boston, honestly, that I think would be a potential problem for the Cavs. And problem is a relative term.
Chris, I think my question was misconstrued. I was asking which team do you think would be the easiest matchup for the
Oh,
Cavs to face in the first round, in the second round, and that's why I said the Atlanta Hawks. I do not think the Atlanta Hawks are the hardest team that the Cavs would have to face. I
oh,
think
I
they
gotcha.
would be an easier matchup for Cleveland. Let me reword the question for you that way, and maybe get your answer on that. Which team do you think is the easiest matchup for the Cavs in the first round and second round? Obviously, I think now that we got your answer on Indiana, the second round question becomes a little bit more easy to answer. But about the first round, out of the teams coming out of the play-in, what are your thoughts on who could give them the most run for their money and the least?
Yeah, I think Atlanta is a team that no longer poses some of the problems to the Cavs that they did early on in the season, in part because the Cavs added DeAndre Hunter, and they fixed what was a big hole, and they were able to find somebody who filled a need for them on the perimeter. But also because Jalen Johnson is not around. He's out for the season with an injury, and he was somebody who stylistically was an issue for the Cavs to deal with. Trae Young is always going to be a problem in a playoff environment. Trae is very, very difficult to deal with, but you can attack him relentlessly on the defensive end of the floor and feel like you have a pathway to consistent offensive success. So Atlanta stands out to me as the team that would probably be the easiest of those in the play-in. Chicago's been playing really good basketball. I just don't think they're ready. So I think Atlanta and Chicago are pretty similar from that standpoint. Um, Maybe you say Chicago is a little bit more formidable just because of the style that they play. They go 5 out, they push the ball up and down the floor. Um, They have enough size on the interior. Like Vooch is somebody who can kind of physically overpower um, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And like I said, they're playing better basketball at this point, although I don't know like how much all of that really means. Miami is just a team that won't go away. And it's like you don't want to completely dismiss them because they have an all-star in Bam. They have an all-star caliber player in Tyler Hero. They have one of the best coaches in the entire NBA. They have a culture in place. They can go zone as good as anybody in the NBA and kind of like flummox an offense. Andrew Wiggins does not play better against any other team in the NBA the way that he does against the Cavs. History has shown that. His numbers support that. So I'm not saying that the Cavs want to avoid Miami, but I think of those teams that are realistic possibilities, I think Miami would probably give them the toughest matchup of those four. Orlando, I just don't think can score. And they lost pieces from what they had last year on that team, including Mo Wagner, who was a problem at times in that 7-game series for the Cavs.
Yep, and I think those are all important points, and I agree with you when it comes to the Orlando Magic, because even in a game against the Boston Celtics the other day, when the Boston Celtics did not have any of their top guys, they literally started Torrey Craig, Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, Peyton Pritchard, and they ended up scoring, the Boston Celtics ended up scoring 76 points. The Orlando Magic scored 96 points against this version of the Boston Celtics. Sure, you could say they won by 20, but like the fact that you still couldn't score 100 points is appalling to me against a team that was so depleted.
I mean, just think about Orlando. They would go into the playoffs, Ethan, as arguably the worst offense of any team in the playoffs. And they would go into the playoffs as the worst shooting team, at least from 3-point standpoint, of any team in the playoffs. Like, that's just not a formula for beating these Cavs. These Cavs, you better be able to score like 115 to 120. And I know, the playoffs are different. They're going to slow down. It's going to be about execution. They're going to be more physical. But like, the offense that we have seen from the Cavs the last 2 years in the playoffs, that's not coming in these playoffs. Like, I don't know that they're going to be historic levels of great the way that we have seen at various points during the regular season. But I know that they're not going to be win a game in the 90s. Like that's not these Cavs. So you better be able to score with these guys. You better be able to shoot with these guys. You better be able to be consistently capable of going into the 110s, 115s, even in a playoff environment, because that's what this team is capable of, and that's what I expect from this team in the playoffs, because I think they have a more diverse offense, because I think they're harder to deal with, because I think they have more pathways for consistent success offensively. You want to send two at Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland? Fine. Then the outlet's going to be Evan Mobley. And we've seen his evolution on the offensive end. The random cutting that the Cavs have incorporated on offense, that's going to bother teams as well. So scoring 90, that's not going to happen. Like, that's not going to be these Cavs. And so Orlando, given the way that they're constructed, and I know Paolo's great, and I know Franz can be a problem in a 7-game series, but they just don't have enough offensive firepower. I don't think it's a problem the way that it was last year for the Cavs against Orlando.
Sorry, Jared Allen, it's not going to be the first to 85 this year, buddy. I apologize to tell you, because if it was the first to 85, the game would be over likely by the third quarter, with the Cavs being the ones to reach 85. But Chris, the last question that I want to ask to you has to do with how this road trip and the end of the season will go. Obviously, you mentioned Ty Jerome will likely have played his last regular season game. Darius, Max, and Evan were the guys that I saw on the bench tonight in Indiana. So I'm assuming that those guys will get one more crack at it tomorrow night against the New York Knicks in New York, and will likely be rested for that Sunday finale. Do you think Donovan Mitchell is done for the rest of the regular season, as he does not look to have been on this trip, as he was tweeting for a majority of the game? And obviously the last chance for him to play would be in the fan appreciation night on Sunday against the Indiana Pacers at Rocket Arena. And sure, everybody loves them some Donovan Mitchell, but I think it'll be better suited for them to celebrate him in street clothes on the bench.
Yeah, I do think Donovan's played his last game in the regular season. I think when it comes to some of these other guys, it's more a case by case basis. And what the Cavs did over the last couple of days is that they gathered as an organization. They talked to everybody that was important when it comes to this decision: medical staff, sports science department, front office, coaches, players, individual trainers, team trainers, like everybody that's important when it comes to this. And they just kind of outlined a plan and said, okay, what do you think would be best? Okay, here's what we think would be best. Are we on the same page when it comes to this? So I do think it's a case by case thing. With Ty Jerome, obviously they wanted him to get some reps toward the end of this season. They wanted him to stay in rhythm. They wanted him to test his knee in a meaningful game situation. He did that. He did that enough. Now it's about, let's preserve his health. Let's make sure that we don't risk it when it comes to him. Donovan, I think they're going to take the same approach. But Kenny also said earlier tonight that there is now another thing that these teams kind of have to navigate here, and it's the play-in tournament. Because of the play-in tournament, there's that extra week off for teams like Boston and Cleveland, and it's okay. How much time are we willing to take off of meaningful game situation basketball? And what is that going to mean for the rhythm of this team? What is that going to mean for each individual player? And I think some guys said to Kenny, hey, like, I don't want to take 9 straight days off. I do not. I want to get some kind of opportunity in one of these final 3 games to go out there and play and keep my rhythm and stay sharp and all those different things. And I think that's why you're going to see a situation where, for the final 3 games, the Cavs just aren't going to shut down everybody. It's going to be a case-by-case basis. And I do expect that some of the mainstays in the starting lineup and some of the mainstays in the rotation are indeed going to play against New York Friday night. And I do think that's because everybody got together and they thought that there was enough of a benefit to doing that. If they didn't have that extended layoff with the play-in tournament, I think it would probably be the same case or a different case. It would be a different case for them. They would certainly look at like each individual guy and they would make the decision that they thought would be best, but there wouldn't be that looming specter of so much added time off that could really take them out of rhythm. So I just think that has thrown in a different kind of wrinkle in Kenny Atkinson is almost refusing to have like 10 straight days off, 9 straight days off for some of his most important players if there's not an injury to worry about. In the case of Donovan, it's different, right? He's dealing with a legitimate sprained ankle. In the case of Max Strus, he's dealing with a bit of a sore knee. But I think the fact that Max was still here, Darius was still here, and Evan was still here, and all 3 of them got some kind of like general workout or general basketball related thing over the last couple of days. Like, I think that speaks to just how the Cavs are going to handle the last couple of games.
And for those that are not familiar, right, the Cavs' last game, the finale of the regular season, comes against the Indiana Pacers on Sunday, April 13th. And the most likely day for them to play their next game would then be 7 days later, a week later on April 20th. As the play-in tournament ends on the 18th. And I think it's very, very unlikely that the NBA puts a back-to-back for any of those teams on the 19th. So that's just the schedule thought process when we talk about Kenny Atkinson and how he is discussed with his team, especially when you talk about the sports science people that he's leaned on so heavily throughout the year. I think it's important to note that what Chris said is based on a rest versus rush situation, which continues to happen in a lot of different sports nowadays. And I wrote about that for the site for cleveland.com if you want to take a larger look of that. But I definitely think that Chris made a great point where he talked about that it's case-by-case basis. Donovan Mitchell more than likely is out for the remainder of the season. Jerome, same kind of light. Evan Mobley, after the game the other night against the Chicago Bulls, talked about how he's kind of in between. He wants to stay healthy, but he still wants to stay in a rhythm. That's why he wants to play against the Knicks more than likely. And then the potential for him to watch and celebrate with his teammates on the sideline against the Pacers. Or, who knows, Kenny Atkinson could throw out some of those guys as well in that last game. That's completely up to them, and especially when we talk about the health of that team, I think it's important that they weigh all the options. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. We do get questions from our subtexters each week. I know we didn't do a big rendition of Hey Chris today or this week, but Dave in PA, I see you. I told you I still got your question logged here. We're going to get into that next week when we have more time to break down specifics of the playoffs, and especially when we know how the Eastern Conference breaks out. But to be able to send in your questions to get shout outs like Dave, or to be able to just have conversations on a daily basis and grow the community of the Cavs with us, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.